What's up, my producer friends? Another monster here, anothermonsterproductions.com. Welcome back to the channel. Welcome back to another video. Today I'm going to show you 5 ways to sidechain in FL Studio 20, and all of these ways use stock FL Studio plugins. There's no third-party plugins or anything like that, so you don't have to worry about that. Now, the reason for me making this video is that I thought it would be kind of fun to do a little experiment, basically doing some common and maybe some less common methods of sidechaining. So what I'm going to do is show you these 5 ways, and then I'm going to actually rate them on a scale of 1 to 10 based on ease of use, how effective they are, and then also just sort of my personal take on how I like to implement it. So without further ado, let's go ahead and jump into the video. All right, so for those of you who are not familiar with sidechaining, let me just give you sort of a brief example of how it would be used. And probably the most common usage is with a kick and a sub bass. And often why it's used this way is because our sub bass and our kick drum are down there in these lower frequencies of the spectrum, and they're competing for a lot of the similar frequencies because there's just not really a whole lot of room for them to move around on there. So what we actually need to do is we need to eliminate one of those sounds in order to make room for the other one so that it can punch through the rest of the mix. And of course, we would want to eliminate the sub bass because we want the kick to hit really hard in the mix every time the kick hits. So how we would do this is we'd essentially automate the sub bass out for that particular time when the kick hits, and then when the kick releases, the sub bass would come back in. All right, so the first way that we're going to sidechain is I'm going to go out on a limb and say this is probably the most common way that most producers sidechain within FL Studio, and that is with the Fruity limiter. So in order for this method of sidechaining, what we're going to need to do is make sure that we have our kick and whatever sample we're using to sidechain to the kick into our mixer track. If you guys don't know how to do this, basically you're going to click this icon here. If you're in the playlist view, click this icon here, just go to your channel settings, and then right here on this little button here, click that, and then we'll go to route to free mixer track. And that's all you have to do to route your samples to your mixer. I've already got them rooted here. So we are in our mixer view, and we have our kick highlighted, which is good. So let's go ahead and make sure this kick's highlighted, and right click this little button here, which is our white noise sample. Go ahead, right click that, and then click sidechain to this track. So now we have it sidechained to our white noise sample. As you notice this little thing here, we have the ability to sort of move the volume, but let's just leave that down for now. So let's go to our white noise sample, make sure this is highlighted, and let's go ahead and click slot 1, and let's find our Fruity limiter. There it is right there. So now we have our Fruity limiter, and it is on our white noise. Let's go ahead and go into our compression settings, and let's do, right here it says sidechain. So let's right click that and sidechain it to the kick, which we have routed to there via the sidechain. And now let's see what happens. Oh man, nothing happens. Well, that's because we still have to change the settings of our compressor. Threshold's all the way up, which essentially means that the compressor is not doing anything right now. So let's go ahead and move this threshold way down. Let's go all the way pretty much down to bottom, and let's see. Well, still not really anything. Let's mess with the knee and see what happens if we do that. Okay, now we're getting something. Okay, now we have a nice sidechain compression going on there. It's very beautiful and it sounds great. And we can of course mess with the knee and the threshold to get the exact settings that we want. All right, so the next method that we're going to use is with the Fruity Peak controller. And with this method, we are also going to have to link our route our kick and our whatever sound we're using to our mixer track as well. In this case, and actually something that's kind of cool about this, and we'll get into that as we sort of progress through this method, but I can actually use essentially a muted kick or a ghost kick in order to trigger the controller and get the sidechain effect that we're looking for, which is pretty cool because then we don't have to rely directly on the kick. We can actually sort of potentially put these in other places and get sort of a different sidechaining effect, not directly to the kick. So this can potentially be pretty useful if you want to go this route. So let's go ahead and click our kick sample 2, which is going to be our muted kick. And what we want to do is just go ahead and put a Fruity Peak controller on it, which is right here. Let's go ahead and look at our Fruity Peak controller. It's looking real nice. There's a little line moving down here, but we don't want to hear this, so we're just going to mute that. And that is basically muting the kick sample. The next thing that we want to do is we want to click on our white noise and then right click this little fader here. And we're just going to link to the controller, which is pretty easy to do. And then we're just going to click right here where it says none. We're going to click peak. And then right here where it says mapping formula, we're just going to click this little arrow and we're going to go to inverted. So this means that basically it's cutting out when the kick hits instead of only playing when the kick hits. So then we can just go ahead and hit accept there. And let's go ahead and take a listen. Okay, so that sounds a little like we're getting a little bit. But the cool thing here is that, we can basically go into our channel settings of our muted kick sound and actually change the volume to change the amount that we're getting of sidechain. So let's kind of listen. And as I mentioned before, we can kind of play with this so that we don't have to have it hitting or coming out every time the kick hits. All right, so that was a pretty cool way to sidechain, but let's go ahead and take a look at how we can sidechain with gross beat. So for gross beat, all we need to do is just basically highlight our white noise, and let's go ahead and insert gross beat directly into our little insert slot 1 there, and there it is right there. So right here, it's very simple. We have a little thing that says sidechain here, which is pretty cool. And now that we have it highlighted, let's take a listen. So that was pretty easy way to achieve instant sidechain. And of course, we have control over these. We can drag this with the left key, or we could just right click and it'll go to the center there, which is also pretty cool. And then, we have control over dragging this stuff. We could potentially delete that point, or we could add a new point by right clicking anywhere on here, and we can go crazy with it if you want. We also have a volume knob which controls the volume down there. All right, so that was a pretty simple and easy way to achieve sidechaining, and actually I'm going to show you kind of another similar way to do this, but instead of using gross beat, we're going to be using the Fruity Love Philter. And really the only reason why I'm including this method is just because I felt like this tutorial was feeling kind of cold and lonely, and I wanted to introduce a little love into it. So let's find our Fruity Love. Where is that? Where is that Fruity Love? Oh, there it is. Fruity Love Philter right there. Okay, so now that we have it onto our white noise, very similar to how we put the gross beat onto our white noise. Let's take a listen. Okay, so obviously we have it filtered out right now. So let's just turn that off. Okay, there we go. So now it's back to normal. Let's make sure that we have our volume highlighted, and we're just on our pattern here, and there's this little dot here. So let's just kind of slide that down by left clicking it and bringing it down. And then if we right click on this, we can kind of create a new point, and then we could right click again. And now we have a nice little sort of, basically it looks the exact same as the gross beat did. So if we right click this point here, there's this little button that says loop start. And basically what we want to do is we want to loop it, because otherwise it's just going to do the sort of LFO shape or the volume automation shape that we did there. And then it's just going to keep playing and it's not going to do it anymore. So we're starting our loop there, and then we're going to right click this point and we're going to go ahead and click sustain / loop end there. And that's going to end our loop. And then let's take a listen. Well, that's weird. It's just not doing anything. Oh, you know why? It's because we haven't clicked this button right here. So it's very important when you're doing this method. First of all, you want your tempo checked, because that means that it's in line with the tempo that you're doing. And then you also want this button checked, and that means that it's actually highlighted and doing something. So let's take another listen. Cool. So now we have our nice little side chain, and similar to gross beat, we can kind of play with this. Very cool. All right, so we've learned some pretty cool ways to sidechain today. At this point, it's not even really sidechain compression anymore. I mean, we're really just doing volume automation with most of these techniques. But the last technique that I want to show you is sort of my personal favorite, and it's not necessarily, wouldn't be applicable for every situation, but it's just really easy to do. And with my personal workflow, I just find it sort of my go-to way to do this, especially when it comes to sub and kick side chaining. So basically all you're going to do for this is we're just going to highlight this small area in between this kick and this kick. It doesn't necessarily have to be that area. It could be just the kick or that. But for this instance, we're going to do this. We're going to go to our mixer and make sure that you have your white noise routed to your mixer track. And that's really all we need. And then we're just going to automate this volume fader here. So we're going to create an automation clip there. And we're just going to move that down. And now we have basically what we had along like with our gross beat and our fruity filter and that sort of thing as well. And then we can get rid of this and go ahead and just sort of copy paste this over. Let's just copy paste it over to there. And then I'll just kind of highlight this and I'll just bring it down over top of that. So now again, we have a nice sort of volume automation, white noise. And the cool thing about this is, we have a lot of control over it. And we also have sort of a visual of what's happening exactly with the kick. So I can slide this up. The reason why this is probably the biggest reason why I like this method is then I can go into here and sort of shape this depending on, how that kick sample's looking. And then I have a lot of control, especially when it comes to kick and bass. Like I mentioned, I can sort of shape this exactly the way I want it. All right, so now it's time for me to rate these different methods of side chaining. And I'm a little bit nervous about doing this, but let's start with method number 1, which was our fruity limiter. And I'm going to rate this method a 9 out of 10. And that's because I know there are a lot of producers out there who use this method, and I don't want to get hate in the comment section down below. But I just feel like it takes so many clicks to achieve what you want to achieve that you could do with these other methods that literally it achieves the exact same thing. So, and it's just personally my least favorite way of side chaining, but that's just my personal preference. Now, let's go to method number 2, which was our fruity peak controller. Now this method, I'm going to give an 8 out of 10. I just feel like it's kind of long. It's a little bit similar to the limiter, the fruity limiter method, where you have to have your kick and whatever you're side chaining it to both in the mixer, and then you have to route them together, and there's like all this extra stuff that just seems kind of unnecessary. Now, I'll give it a couple extra points because it's pretty cool that you can do this sort of ghost kick thing and have a lot of control over it with that. But it's not really that cool. I mean, you can also do that with just volume automation. So the next one, which is we have our gross beat. I'm going to give that a 9 out of 10 because it is just super simple, straightforward to use. It doesn't really take a genius to figure out how to sort of shape the curves, and it's very easy, and it's just we load it up on our thing, and then there you go. So Fruity Love Philter, I'm going to also give a 9 out of 10, and that's because it brought some love into this tutorial. Otherwise, I'd probably give it like a 7 out of 10. It just seems like kind of a lot of extra clicks to do exactly the same thing that you could just do in gross beat. So yeah, and then my final method, I'm giving a 10 out of 10. Volume automation, straight out of the mixer. I personally love it. There it is. Thanks for checking out the video, guys. If you liked it, please go ahead, hit that like button. If you're new to the channel, subscribe. Don't forget to hit the bell notification. Also, be sure to check the description of this video. I've got a couple free things that I'm giving away, and also check out my Discord server link. You can click that little link. It'll take you to my Discord. You can join, and then you can debate with the fellow producers that we have in there about which method of sidechaining really is the best. See you guys in the next video.